This guy, Flash Thompson, he probably deserved what happened. But just because you can beat him up doesn't give you the right to. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Those fellows at Amazing Spider-Man do not waste any time. We just had the big events of Amazing Spider-Man 74, Nick Spencer's swan song, 80 pages, 80 full pages, basically like a trade that we got last week. You finally coming up with recovering from the death of fake Harry, clone Harry, and the realization that there were two Kindreds, and I don't know. I thought it ended up kind of being a mess, but it's a perfectly fine comic book if you don't think about everything that came before it. That's kind of the way I felt about Amazing Spider-Man 74. But this week we're already into Amazing Spider-Man 75. We got a new logo on the comic book as far as the trade dress. We are in the Beyond era. We got the Beyond board, which is Zeb Wells, Patrick Gleason, who are on this comic book. We've also got Cody Ziegler. Who else is there? Kelly Thompson, Sonic Ahmed. There might be one more, but that's the Beyond board. It's a brain trust of creators. Kind of, it feels like they're coming in as Nick Spencer left early to kind of get things back in order, get us to 2022 and the 60th anniversary of Amazing Fantasy 15, the 60th anniversary of the introduction of Peter Parker Spider-Man, where he will likely reassume the mantle of Spider-Man in an issue number 1 reboot. But before then, we do get this Beyond era, and I'll say this first issue is pretty good. There are a couple things that I don't know make complete sense, but as far as the story goes, I think they did a good job. They certainly put their best foot forward, putting Zeb Wells, who I think of the group is the best writer by far, and they put Patrick Gleason, who's easily the best artist. And I think they have announced the Beyond era in a good way. I think they have a couple of character flaws. Not character flaws. Every character has flaws. Some characterization issues with one Ben Reilly that I don't know makes complete sense, but I'm sure they will attempt to make it. We got a pretty damn good cover here from Art Adams. Actually, it's a double, it's a front and back cover. It's actually looks pretty nice, and I think people are going to enjoy this. As far as the Beyond era, which I think is going to be a cluster because there's too many writers, too many cooks in the kitchen. The opening issue is actually pretty darn good. I would highly recommend this. I'll give this this is a 4 out of 5. The art is absolutely spectacular, and the story's good. It's a good opening act to get you into the new story. Now, before I do get into all the details of this comic book review, Amazing Spider-Man 75, I do want to say, if you are going to be at New York City Comic Con this weekend, and it sounds like a lot of people are, my friends over at Comics Elite will have a booth there, and I believe Drew told me they're going to have 10 spectacular New York City Comic Con exclusive covers. They might be on pre-sale on their website right now. I'm not really sure, but they're going to have 10 of them. So there's going to be a lot of product there. Also, if you saw my video with John Leone talking about the Penguin Random House issues, he's also going to be there. You'll see him wearing the 616 logo t-shirt. He's not going to have a booth, but if you see him, say hi, say West Side. So definitely be looking out for those guys. If you're going to be at New York City Comic Con, I hope you have a good time. I got a lot of friends that are going to be there. Maybe you'll even see Perch, but you probably won't know you saw it. So that could be fun. Now, as far as Amazing Spider-Man 75, the first thing that you will notice, the art from Patrick Gleason has a wildly different tone than what he was doing during Last Remains and when he was illustrating the Nick Spencer story arcs that he was doing. I thought he was brought in to be like the primary Spider-Man artist. Never really felt like that's who he was, but he did do most of the Last Remains story arc. And it was very grisly, gritty, a lot of, a lot of sketchy kind of art. Obviously, that was fitting in with the horror tone of what Nick Spencer was doing with Kindred within Amazing Spider-Man. We get here, and it's much more akin to what we saw from Patrick Gleason on Superman and Super Sons. It's a much smoother, cleaner, crisper looking image, and it certainly speaks to the quality of the artist that Patrick Gleason is, that he can switch between a more horror-centric Spider-Man story and definitely get that gritty feel that Nick Spencer was going for, and then get over here to this Spider-Man Beyond era and completely change up his line style and the way that he's illustrating the character in the scenery. Beautiful work by Patrick Gleason, and he certainly drives home that this is completely different than what they were doing with Nick Spencer's Amazing Spider-Man. While they are not running away from what Nick Spencer did. Certain elements of what he was doing in his storyline certainly rolled over right into this. So kudos to Patrick Gleason for setting a new tone and really letting people know that this is a different feel than what Nick Spencer was doing. They really aren't doing the horror elements. You see this image right here. This is a pretty gritty, determined situation. The art style does not mimic anything that we saw with Patrick Gleason on the Last Remains era. Now, getting into the story, there are two big things that are being driven home in this story. Now, obviously, there's some action. It opens up with a cool little scene. Peter Parker feeling kind of down. He's swinging through the city, wants to get his head straight. He sees another Spider-Man, tries to chase him down. It's a nice little action scene. It's actually pretty darn good for being like 3 pages. And then finally, we get this sit-down scene between Peter Parker and Ben Reilly. I do want to mention, why the hell is Peter Parker still in college? He's like 30 now. Why is he still going to Empire State? He was literally a billionaire businessman. He even mentions that I was bad at business. Why would he go back to college? Shouldn't he have a job? You know what I'm saying? Somebody wants to hire him. He's a damn genius. He shouldn't be in college. He's too old for that. He's far too accomplished. That ran out of the way. We do get this sit down between Peter Parker and Ben Reilly, and really what's being driven home here, besides the fact that Peter Parker is about to lose his superhero identity, is that Peter Parker and Ben Reilly are in two very different places in their lives. Peter Parker appears to be at a low point. Obviously, he just lost his best friend, Harry, although it was a clone. And then Ben Reilly, who last time Peter saw him was at a low point in his life, has really rebounded. He's looking more optimistic, although I don't like the characterization of some of the stuff that they're doing with Ben here. It's an interesting sit down as Ben is explaining to Parker that, hey, have you heard of the Beyond Corporation? Peter Parker's like, maybe, I don't really remember. He goes, just to let you know, they've been buying up a lot of IP lately. And one of the things they did was they went and basically bought out Parker Enterprises. He's like, okay, what does that have to do with me? You know, that's worth nothing. There's nothing left there. He's like, well, actually, you guys at Parker Enterprises or whatever it was, you like patented the Spider-Man name, like the Spider-Man logo or whatever. So when the Beyond Corporation bought it, now they own Spider-Man. They own like the look and the IP of it, which I guess is pretty meta considering what's going on right now with Steve Ditko. There's no way they planned this. They couldn't have. They couldn't have anticipated, 2 weeks prior to this, Steve Ditko's estate would be filing suit to return the copyrights back to the family. So it's pretty interesting, pretty meta going on right here. And Peter's like, you can't take that identity away from me. I'm Spider-Man. But the problem is it really makes Ben Reilly look like a corporate sellout. Like he's some kind of corporate stooge, which I don't know really fits the Ben Reilly character all that well. He's certainly taking the money, and they're spending a lot of money making him the new Spider-Man. There's also, it's kind of weird because you have this Beyond board. They buy up all this IP. They don't know who Spider-Man is, but they know that Ben Reilly could be Spider-Man. There's definitely some ulterior motives, and I imagine that's what this whole storyline is going to be about. But they certainly introduced that pretty well here, like some seeds that this Beyond board is probably not on the up and up, and probably not looking out for Ben Reilly's best interest, and perhaps they're looking to identify who Peter Parker is or something. There's definitely something nefarious going on there where Ben Reilly's being used. Don't know exactly that Ben Reilly is the perfect character to be a corporate sellout, like within the story arc. But that's what they're going for here. And they're in very different places in their lives. And, it's pretty interesting. Ben Reilly's Spider-Man suit absolutely destroys Peter Parker's Spider-Man suit. We'll get that here in a minute when we get the final action scene. The other thing that's really being driven home, besides the difference in the places in their lives between Ben and Peter, and obviously Ben's in a better place mentally, spiritually, and certainly financially. Peter still can't make any money off the Spider-Man gimmick that he's been doing, is the loss of Harry Osborn and how it's affected Peter. Like someone's coming by at the very beginning. They want to go talk to him about losing Harry and how they're feeling about it. And he's like, well, I'm strong enough to do this. And then the next thing you know, you see him escaping out the side but I'll do it tomorrow. Like he doesn't want to face his feelings, the feelings of loss that he's gone through. Mary Jane knows what's going on. She's trying to comfort him, talk to him about all the things that are happening. And Peter's kind of being withdrawn and not really wanting to get into the hurt and all the things that they just went through together in the whole Kindred story, which have, lasted for like 2.5 years. And that's the other big thing that's being driven home. So you got this, the opposition of places in their lives for Peter Parker and Ben Reilly, and then Peter Parker not wanting to confront his feelings and what has happened, the loss that he's just experienced, as Mary Jane is trying to help him out through that. Now, certainly there's some action being interspersed in this. We get to the big climactic scene at the end where Peter Parker arrives on the scene of Empire State University to face off with the UFOs. And it turns out they've already heard his joke because Ben Reilly's there, and they decide that they're going to fight him together. And it's pretty banger. Let me put it this way. Jerry Conway, you need these great sound effects within comic books, especially when you have this great art by Patrick Gleason. It really adds to the effect of everything that you're seeing. It's so kinetic. It's so wild. It's like you can feel the action is like pouring off the pages at you. Patrick Gleason is absolutely an undervalued treasure within the comic book industry, and he lets it loose on this one. This is the best Patrick Gleason art we've seen on an Amazing Spider-Man comic book. In my opinion, I much prefer this, what you're seeing here, over the horror elements, and he is perfectly fine as underselling it. He's a very good horror artist, but he's in his element when he's making really cool, powerful characters do really cool, powerful stuff when they're in action, in motion, doing heroic stuff. So this stuff all looks good. Unfortunately for Peter, and I guess fortunately for Ben, he's got this reinforced suit. This big guy punches him, and he's got some styrofoam that's like it responds to kinetic energy, kind of stuff. It's overpowered. Let's put it this way. There's probably too much stuff going on in that Ben Reilly Spider-Man suit as he's taking over the mantle of Spider-Man within the city. And Peter Parker, he's doing his best to kind of keep up. It's not working out for him. And then at one point, there's an enormous explosion, which basically gets us to the cover for the next issue, which we've obviously seen. It's Peter Parker in a hospital, looks like he's about to die, as Mary Jane is tending to him. We've also seen the teaser art where he's on the ground, he's a bloody mess, and she comes up, to comfort him. I imagine we'll be seeing that within the first few pages of issue number 76. And that is essentially what happens. This is a very good issue. If you like action, the action looks spectacular. If you like, some good interpersonal moments, characters being taken to an all-time low, that's certainly what's happened to Peter Parker, as Ben Reilly is being elevated up past where he was before. The real problem I see is with why is Peter Parker still in college, but I guess that's not really my issue or their issue. Just let the guy not go back to college. The other issue is, why is Ben Reilly a corporate sellout all of a sudden? It doesn't feel like that's really who the character is. So it does feel a little bit disappointing. Is this meta commentary on big corporations like Disney and AT&T becoming the overlord of our comic book superheroes and taking them away from us? It kind of feels like it, if that's what they're going for. I think they've been really successful in kind of starting that kind of story. You know what I mean? It feels like that's kind of where they're going with this, which I think would be pretty interesting meta commentary as far as this. I don't believe they're trying to say anything about Ditko because they couldn't have planned this out. But it's an interesting story. It's an interesting start. Don't know that I love every single creative decision, but that's not what I'm here for. I don't have to love all of it. I think Zeb Wells produces a very good script. It's pretty tight. There are lots of great action sequences. Patrick Gleason lets you know from the very first page that this is a new age in Spider-Man, but they do not let go or they don't forget what just happened in Nick Spencer's run. So I think this has been very successful. We'll see if you can take 5 comic book writers and produce a coherent story moving forward that gets us into the 60th anniversary of Spider-Man. But hey, as far as I'm concerned, Amazing Spider-Man 75 is superior to Amazing Spider-Man 74. I highly recommend it, and I think everyone's going to enjoy it.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.